And in that 90% of the time, they will do fine. 10% of the time, not so good. It's too scary. I can't do this. So I went through this very lengthy, elaborate conversation with this first child. He's 8 years old that I'm going to do, and I'm telling him about the blocks I'm going to put in and the stick and all this stuff. And I turned to my interpreter, and he interprets for literally 30 seconds. And I've gone on for 10 minutes. And I said, "Did you tell him everything I said?" He said, "I told him everything he needed to know."
Oh.
Which was basically, you know, this is your chance, and your job here is to be really still. And if you cry, it's okay to cry, but you may not move. And the child was, you know, that wouldn't work particularly well in this country.
No,
I mean, you need
I mean,
more
it really
explanation and whatnot. But there is, at age 8, they were fine. 8 on, they just sat there and held it, and you just went, that is remarkable, just truly remarkable.
Did I interrupt your slides?
Probably.
Okay. You want to go back to this?
Let's see what else is there. Okay. And here's another bilateral lip before, and then one. And if you'll go to the next slide, this is a child that, and again before surgery, and then the next slide is about age 9. Just to give you a, you can see there is still, and this actually was shortly after a revision we did, and so those scars would not be that noticeable. They're still relatively pink because it's so soon after a revision that we did. But that's, you know, what one can expect to say. This is pretty much transforms one's life.
But just looking at this, I mean, you can see how remarkable the transformation is with this child, even though the scars are still red.
Right. And that's good for the slides now.
Okay. What you do for these children has to be so rewarding, and you're bound to learn stuff with each trip you make.
Oh yeah.
Other than language and whatever, and the rewards that you feel. The first reward is, well, an interesting story to point it out. My wife went to nursing school at the tender age of 50 to get her degree. Right, I remember.
And part of it was to say, you know, what am I supposed to do while you're out playing Albert Schweitzer? And I said, well, why don't you come along? And so she went and got her nursing degree, and so she's been on some of the trips with me. And the first place she wanted to go was Kenya. I had been to Kenya, and I had these wonderful stories and slides from Kenya, and so we went to Kenya. And the very first day I'm operating, I had been to Kenya in 1996, and this was 2006, we were back in Kenya. And we're operating 2 operating tables in the same room. And we had one surgeon that it was one of the African surgeons, one of the Kenyans, had an emergency, and he had to leave. And they said, well, you all have more children to do. We're going to pull one of the surgeons from Kisumu down to you all. And so, you know, we hadn't had a chance to meet. He was coming, he got there Monday morning late. So I'm operating. And when you're operating in the same room, physicians in general are somewhat competitive. And so you're looking over what your mate's doing. And he's knocking these things out a lot quicker than I am, and I'm thinking, yeah, but his probably don't look as good as mine. And I go to the recovery room, and I'm looking at his cases and going, wow, he's really good. And so we're scrubbing, and I introduce myself, and he says, you don't remember me, do you? And I said, I'm sorry, have we met before? And he said, yeah. He said, I'm Bernard Katai. And I went, oh, Bernard. He said, you taught me how to do this.
Oh, that's so cool.
You know, and I'm like, oh, I didn't teach you how to do it like that. He said, you're operating circles around me. But in 1996, he had been one of the fellows that came and had operated and done, you know, 1 or 2 cases with us, and had started volunteering for the local mission, and just.
So your rewards really extend past what you're doing with these children.
Oh yeah.
It goes into what you're able to teach people, what you're able to leave behind in knowledge, and that kind of thing. I think that's wonderful.
Well, and the other thing is, we have another slide back there that one of the missions I was on, if we could show the last slide. Okay. One of the missions I was on was very harried. I was in charge. I hate doing that because it's all the responsibility. And the worst part of the job, particularly if you're in charge, is
You're screening 300 children, you're going to do 150. At some point, you have to tell 150 children, we can't do you.
Bad.
I was getting ready till we had finished screening, packed the stuff up, and I'm leaving to go tell 150 children, you didn't make the cut. And this young nurse comes in and says, I have a child out here that's walked for 2 days, rode a bus for 7 hours with his mother, and has just walked another 6 hours to come see you to be screened. And I went, screening's over. You have to go tell him we can't do him. She said, I can't tell him that. I said, I'm going to go tell 150. You're going to have to go tell him. And she said, really? Long story short, she came back in tears and said, did you tell him? I said, yeah. And I said, what'd they say? She said, they're going to wait for you.
Oh,
and I'm like, oh, jeez. So I went out the front door, and here is this child, Joseph. And, you know, the long story. And I asked him, I look at him, and I'm looking down at him, look at him, and go, well, he must be here to have his palate fixed because his lip's fine. And the mother looks at me, and through an interpreter, I said, so why are you here? She said, Joseph had to come to see you. Not me personally, but to see you all. And I said, why is that? Because you all fixed his cleft lip last year,
Oh,
and
how
he
wonderful.
wanted to show you how handsome he was.
How wonderful.
You know, and talk about putting you in your place to say, oh, Mr. Hotshot, you know, every trip there's a little tap on your shoulder that says, this is why I brought you here. And it never fails. You know, you think, well, I got too much work at home. I shouldn't have left home at this time. I got this patient that's sick, and I'm deserting them. And all of a sudden, there's that little, this is really important.
This is what it's all about.
This is why I brought you here, and this is where you're supposed to be.
That's so cool. I would like to say that if anybody is interested in more information about what you do and about Operation Smile, if anybody's interested in volunteering, if anybody wants to make a donation,
Sure.
the website has just been up there. Yeah,
okay.
it will appear if it hasn't already. There you go. There's
Yeah,
your website.
right.
If anybody needs to get in touch with Dr. Fuller, can you think of anything else, one thing that you would like to say, one child that because we're almost out of time, that you'd like to remember?
The one thing that comes to mind, and it had to do with he was an orthodontist who was having a great time, and he was taking care of the kid's teeth. We did a 17-year-old that had this horrible bilateral cleft lip that only a mother could really love, and look at and love. He had pulled the teeth because they were so rotten up front. I had fixed her lip. We had just gotten finished. It was under local. He put in an appliance that had these beautiful teeth that matched the rest of her teeth. And he stopped right there, and we're trying to crank these kids out, and he just stops and admires, said, this is why I came. He said, this is a miracle. You know, and I flippantly said, she does miracles.
Right.
You and I do surgery. We
Right.
need to do the next case. And he looked at me and he said, no, this was a miracle.
Well, Dr. Fuller, we are almost out of time. I thank you so much for
Indeed,
coming.
my pleasure. Thank you.
And sharing your experiences with us. And I admire so much the time that you give to these kids and your dedication to this program.
Thank you.
Thank you again. If anybody has any comments about this show, please feel free to send them to Operation Smile, or please send them to our email, lynchburglive@aol.com. Have a nice evening. We enjoy hearing from you, and we have some really good stuff coming up as the weeks go by. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thanks.